Greetings, loved ones. Psychological abuse of a child is a pattern of intentional, verbal, or behavioral actions or lack of actions that convey to a child the message that he or she is worthless, flawed, unloved, unwanted, endangered, or only of value to meet someone else's needs. Withholding emotional support, isolation, or terrorizing a child are forms of psychological abuse. Domestic violence that is witnessed by a child is also considered a form of psychological abuse. Today we're going to talk about the psychological abuse of children. So help us get these messages out. Please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, hit the like button and the notification bell, and please share these messages with others. You could save a life. So let's talk about what is psychological abuse of a child. Psychological abuse of a child is a pattern of intentional verbal or behavioral actions or lack of actions that convey to a child the message that he or she is worthless, flawed, unloved, unwanted, endangered, or only of value to meet someone else's needs. Withholding emotional support, isolation, or terrorizing a child are forms of psychological abuse. And domestic that is witnessed by a child is also considered a form of psychological abuse. But there are different types of child psychological abuse. Psychological abuse of a child is often divided into 9 categories. So let's look at these 9 categories. Number 1 is rejection. To reject a child, to push him away, to make him feel that he is useless or worthless, to undermine the value of his ideas or feelings, or to refuse to help him. Second form of psychological abuse is scorn. That means to demean the child, to ridicule him, to humiliate him, to cause him to be ashamed, or to criticize the child and to insult him. Third form of psychological abuse of a child is terrorism. And this is when they threaten a child or someone who is dear to him with physical violence, abandonment, or death, to threaten to destroy the child's possessions, to place him in chaotic or dangerous situations, to define strict and unreasonable expectations, and to threaten him with punishment if he does not comply. The fourth form of psychological abuse of a child is isolation. This is to isolate a child physically or socially, to limit his opportunities to socialize with others. The fifth form of psychological abuse of a child is corruption or exploitation. This is to tolerate or encourage inappropriate or deviant behavior, to expose the child to antisocial role models, to consider the child as a servant, to encourage him or coerce him to participate in sexual activities. And the sixth form of psychological abuse of a child is the absence of emotional response. This is to show oneself as inattentive or indifferent towards the child, to ignore his emotional needs, to avoid visual contact, kisses, or verbal communication with him, and to never congratulate him. Neglect means ignoring the health or educational needs of a child, to refuse to or neglect to apply the required treatment. A seventh form of psychological abuse of a child is exposure to domestic violence. This is to expose a child to violent words and acts between his parents. The behavior of an emotionally abusive parent or caregiver does not support a child's healthy development and well-being. Instead, it creates an environment of fear, hostility, or anxiety, and a child is sensitive to the feeling, opinions, and actions of their parents. An eighth form of psychological abuse of children is showing a lack of regard for the child, such as this behavior often includes rejecting the child by not showing affection, ignoring the child's presence and obvious needs, ignoring the child when he or she needs comfort, and not calling the child by his or her name. And the ninth form of psychological abuse against a child is saying unkind things to the child. Emotionally abusive parents say things or convey feelings that can hurt a child deeply. Common examples of this include making the child feel unwanted, perhaps by stating or implying that the life would be easier without the child. For example, a parent may tell a child, "I wish you were never born." It can also be ridiculing or belittling the child, such as saying, "You are stupid." It can also be threatening the child with harsh punishment or even death. "I'm going to kill you." And there's continuous verbal abuse. So let's talk about symptoms of child psychological abuse. And these may include difficulties in school, eating disorders resulting in weight loss or poor weight gain, emotional issues such as low self-esteem, depression, and anxiety, rebellious behavior, sleep disorders, vague physical complaints. According to the CDC, over half of all the children in the world, that's 1 billion children, ages 2 to 17, experience violence every year. The question is not if you'll encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. If you're a victim of violence, I want you to listen to me. I want you to know that you are loved, you are valued, you are intelligent, and yes, you are worthy. God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. I want you to know that there is a way out. It's not your fault. Abuse is not love. And most of all, I want you to know that you are not alone. If you're suffering violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. And if you know of a child or other person suffering violence, tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk about neglect. And until then, God bless you.